Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article is speaking about India's democracy. It speaks about the flaws in the Indian democracy and what are the steps that we may have to initiate in the near future so that this execution of democracy happens in a rightful manner. First, this article makes a mention of what is called as the International Day of Democracy. What is this International Day of Democracy? It is a United Nations designated day which is usually celebrated every year on September 15th. What is the significance of this day? Basically, it provides an opportunity to review the state of democracy in the entire world. What is this review of the state of democracy? Basically, there are certain fundamental aspects of democracy: political rights, voting rights, freedom, respect for human rights, whether the elections happen on a periodic basis, are they genuine in nature. These are some of the fundamental aspects of democracy, whether they are working or not, and if they are not working, what changes have to be done is what is this review state of democracy. In this particular backdrop, let us try and understand how the democracy as a concept evolved across the length and breadth of the world. We have number of countries which became democratic only after World War II. Why? Because most of the countries did not even exist, and some of the countries did have democracy, and all these countries that did not have democracy were under the control of the colonial powers. So after World War II, what we have is number of countries which became independent, and that is when we have the wave of democracy because the colonial powers withdrew themselves, and what we have is an independent establishment of a country. So because they had to choose one path, they chose democracy. Today we have more than 120 countries which are democratic in nature. What are some of the important and genuine aspects of democracy? It includes voting through the universal adult suffrage, periodic elections, all parties come together, they have an equal opportunity, they contest the elections, then they actually win the elections. So we have slow and the gradual transformation from one political party forming the government to another political party forming the government. Then we also have the existence of an independent press as well. They are the ones who also question the people, they are the ones who also question the judiciary, they are the ones who also question the government of the day. So all the information with respect to the aspects of the government, the democratic rights will be questioned by the press, and the same information will also be delivered to the people when it comes to the independent press. Then we also have an independent judiciary as well, which is an aspect of democracy. These are some of the basic foundations when it comes to democracy. But is it all? No. Yes, they are the essence of democracy, but democracy is beyond this particular viewpoint. We have something called as the United Nations World Happiness Report for the year 2020. So what is this happiness report? Basically, you would have people who would be interviewed, so they are the respondents in that particular country. Let's say there is one of the groups which comes to India, it asks the questions, there is the interviewer, there is also a respondent, so they are asked questions on number of factors. So what are these factors on which happiness is defined? Let's say for example the social support. What is this social support? Let's say for example there is an emergency that I have, or there is an exigency as well. In that particular backdrop, will I be able to ask my relatives for some help? Will I be able to ask my neighbors for some help, or I would be able to ask the state for some help? So this help given by all the stakeholders to me when I am in trouble is what is called as social support. In case there is a country which is democratic in nature and there are people in the neighborhood and the state which is providing it, they would be given a particular marking of 10. And in case there is a democratic country and there is no state setup which is delivering the goods to me at the time of an exigency and emergency, that means the social support with respect to the neighborhood and the government is getting reduced, and this will also have zero as well. So in case there is social support which is more, then it is having a mark of 10. If it is less, it will be given a mark of 0. So on this very basis, an average is taken across the country, and social support will define one of the parameters of happiness. Then we also have the health emergency as well. Let's say for example, I am a poor person, so I have to go to the hospitals as well. Do we have the hospitals in that particular democratic country? In case they are present, are they functioning well? This is also taken into picture to define as one of the objectives of happiness. Then we also have the freedom to make life choices. Are they pressure? Let's take the example of Afghanistan, or let's take the example of Somalia. In case there are women who want to study, there are groups, there are extremist groups which do not let the women study as well. In case there are certain biases within that particular country on the basis of ethnicity, on the basis of religion, on the basis of language, as we see in Sri Lanka, it means there is freedom which I cannot pick up, which means in case I want to pick up one particular field for my future, I would not be able to take because of the political nature in that particular society, or because of the presence of an extremist group as well. That is what is called as freedom to make life choices. Apart from that, we also have corruption as one of the consequences of the society. In case there is increasing corruption, again we would not be able to work effectively. In case all this is on the zero level, it means the society is not happy. In case it is at the upper level, which means there is no corruption, the health is very good, the social support is very good, it means the happiness report will work. When it comes to this happiness report of the year 2020, we have the democracies of Western Europe which come in the picture of top 10 rankings. But when we consider India, it is ranked 144 out of 153 countries. Looking at this, we see that all the top rankings have been taken up by the European countries, and India is ranked 144 out of 155 countries. Yes, we have democracy, but happiness is missing, which is what we have to reflect upon. So the first key criteria here is democracy as an executional project. When it comes to the elections, when it comes to the political rights, we have all those aspects, but when it comes to the actual implementation, according to the happiness report, we are ranking low, and as a result, the democracy as a fruitful exercise will have to be reflected. Then we also have to look at what is called as the institutional strength. What is an institution? Let's say for example, we have the election commission, or let's say for example we have the UPSC. So what does the institution do? They have a prescribed or a devised rules and procedures which they have to function. Let's say the election commission, it has to conduct the elections. Let's say the UPSC, it has to conduct examinations. So there are prescribed rules and regulations within which it has to function. If it does not function within this particular rules, and there is constant interference from the political parties, it means there is violation of the institutional strength. When it comes to the institutional strength, we have to look at two parameters. One is what is called as establishment, the other is what is called as enforcement. So what is this establishment? Establishment is basically establishing that particular office. Let's say for example we have the Lokpal, or let's say for example we have the Chief Vigilance Commissioner. So we are establishing a new office. That is one of the aspect of institutional strength. Then what we have is the enforcement. So what is this enforcement? Let's say for example we have the rules, we have the regulations. So the degree to which these rules are complied by is what is called as enforcement. So it is not only about the rules that are present, but whether these rules are executed, whether they are complied by, will be decided by the enforcement. If we have the establishment of an institution and we have the enforcement, this is what will result in called as stability. So what is stability? Whether that particular institution is working in a right way or not, and whether this particular institution has durability, working for an effective period of time, is what is called as stability. So basically when it comes to the institution, it is about establishment of an institution, and it is also about the enforcement of rules of an institution. But there are concerns when it comes to the institutions in democracy. How? Let's say for example, there is the legislature. So what does the legislature do? They come up with new institutional programs, they set up institutions as well. If they have been established weakly or they have been enforced weakly, that is because the original intent of the legislature is to establish it in a weaker manner. Let me give you a simple example. We had a lot of issues when it comes to corruption. So what did the people of India do? They came onto the roads, they started voicing their opinion against the corruption that is prevalent in the system, and that is when the government came up with a particular policy of Lokpal as well. Yes, the government came up with an institution of Lokpal, but is it being enforced? No is the answer. So what happens? Yes, the legislator wanted to establish an institution, but this is a weak establishment. This is enforced weakly, and that is the major issue when it comes to the institution. This is what is being called as placebo governance by TSR Subramaniam. TSR Subramaniam sir happened to be the cabinet secretary. He is no more with us. He says, in case there is a government, in case the government does not want to actually execute it, but just because the people are asking for it, just because the people want a new institution, that is when a new institution is established, and that is through what is called as placebo governance. So plus, what is placebo governance here? It is the intention of the legislature to establish an institution just for appeasing the people is what is called as placebo governance. This can also be called as lollipop politics. Why? Let's say for example, if children are crying, what do parents do? They give a lollipop and the children are simply quiet. This is what happens in politics as well. Let's say for example, if people are crying because there is an institutional flaw, this is also called as lollipop politics. Why? It is a law being drafted, and that law is just to appease the people of India. So the first problem here is about weak establishment of an institution. Then there is another issue as well. Let's say there is this particular law which is very beautifully scripted. It is beautifully drafted, but when it comes to its execution, there is a problem. So the legislation have done a beautiful job, but the people who actually enforce it are not able to enforce it. Let me give you another example. Let's say the demonetization. The demonetization as a program had an agenda to weed out the black money. But what exactly happens? It is also being said that bank managers had a close cooperation with all those people who were planning to convert black money into white money. So the law, the agenda was beautiful, but when the people are executing it, that is not really good. That is the second institutional problem when it comes to democracy. So what are the two issues? One, the legislatures are implementing a law which is weakly established or enforced. Then you have the legislators who have actually drafted this particular law which is beautiful in nature, but the implementers, the enforcers are not implementing as per the original intention. Now when you go back to the historical perspective, you have Prime Minister Nehru, who after independence had stated that the goal of independence was to create institutions which will ensure justice and fullness of life for every man and woman. In this particular backdrop, what we have to realize is institutional strengthening of the democracy. But Nehru did not say that government will create all these institutions as well. It is people who also create it, build it, run it and sustain it. Let us take the example of what happened in 1960 when it comes to United States of America. There was three beautiful movements that took place in United States of America. One is black empowerment, second is women's emancipation, which is about gender parity. Why? Because women were not being respected. And third is what is called as sexual liberation. So what is this sexual liberation? Let's say for example, when it comes to a conservative society or when it comes to a traditional setup, it was more conservative in nature. There was strict no to the abortion. There was strict no to the contraception. There was strict no to the homosexuality, and all these practices were not accepted in the conservative society. So this movement was about making sure that there was black empowerment, women emancipation and sexual liberation. And who guided this particular program? It was the people. So whenever there have been people movements, it is they who enforce the accountability when it comes to the institutions. So they ask the government government, because we are the active participants in the democracy, it is the will of the people. They ask the government that you establish such and such institution, and it is they who run it, build it, and also sustain it. Yes, the government plays an activation when it comes to this particular installation of the institution, but who actually look into it, who has to have a vigilant eyes of it? It is the people, says the author of this article. So it is not only about establishing the institutions, but it is also about having a vigilant eye whose onus is on the people. So the government and the people will have equal responsibility when it comes to the strengthening of the institutions within the paradigms of democracy, is the first key parameter when it comes to this article. Then we have something called as the capability approach. If your optional is public administration, if you are a student of public administration, you have two parts in your public administration paper, part A and part B. In part A, you have 8th chapter called as development dynamics. This is a very important concept with respect to 8th chapter in development dynamics. So what is this capability approach as given by Amartya Sen? Let's say, for example, when it comes to capability, I have a different capability for executing a particular project or for studying for that matter. You also have a different capability. Both of us cannot be compared. Or let's say, for example, you have a friend, your capabilities can again not be compared. Why? Because it has an intellectual capacity which is totally different. Now let's take another situation. Let's say I have a capacity to study and you also have a capacity to study. Both of us have equal intellectual capacities. Our IQs are also same, but this will also require the same start as well. Let's say you are a rich person, let's say I am a poor person, but I will not have certain other provisions. So what will be affected here is the external factor. So what is this external factor? It can be the gender, it can be inequality that is prevalent, the discrimination on the basis of disability, environmental condition, or other issues that is influencing my environment. Because you are rich, you have internet supply at home. Because you are rich, you are not have to work anything anywhere. But since I am poor, I'll have to take care of my family. Because I am poor, I don't have internet at home. So because we have equal capabilities, but our zones, our environment, and our work culture is totally different, which means your capability and my capability influenced by the environment is not same, says this capability approach. So what should the government do in order to make sure that my capability is capitalized upon, in order to make sure that I have the freedom to choose what I want? It is the government that has to enter in this particular backdrop. So it is the government which also has to make sure that it removes all the hurdles when I'm going towards my goal and destination. But it is not only about removing the obstacles, but it is also about providing all the things that will make me reach my goal. So what should the government do? The government should be providing me all the support that is required in terms of funding, in terms of financing, so that I can explore my own capabilities. Let me give you another example as well. Health and education is one of the most important sectors. If I am not given education, how will I explore my capability? I might want to become a scientist, I might want to become an engineer. I have equal capacity than you have, but the problem is I do not have the opportunities. So Amartya Sen here says that when there are capabilities that one person wants to enhance, the government will have to encourage, will have to give the push, will have to support by financing. It is not only about removing the obstacles through the laws and the constitution, but there is something called as directive principles of state policy, where the government should also enforce things when it comes to education as well as health. This is what is capability approach. There is another view as well, and that view is what is called as the radical view. So what is this radical view? In case I have the capability, I will have to ensure I self empower myself, says the radical approach. I don't have to rely on any person, I don't have to rely on any stakeholder, I don't have to rely even on the government, is what is this radical viewpoint. But the capability approach says yes, there are issues, but these issues will have to be solved by some additional encouragement given by the government. Like in happiness, what this article says is that United Nations Human Development Index for the year 2019, India had ranked 129 out of 189 countries. So India, both on the happiness level and also on the democracy level, is suffering, says the author of this article. So what are the challenges when it comes to the execution of democracy? One of the major challenges to democracy is people losing faith in democracy. Why? This can be due to corruption, this can be due to nepotism, or this can also be due to unemployment crisis, as they feel that the government is not doing enough for the people. And at the same time, there can be an issue of disengagement when it comes to the public policy. The government comes up with a bill, the government comes up with a draft. In case the people are not happy with it, and in case the people do opposite, but the government still continues to pass this particular bill, that is what is called as disengagement, which also means they become powerless. Apart from this, there is also neglect and repression as well. What is this neglect and repression? Let's say, for example, freedom of speech when it comes to the normal democracy is curtailed. When it comes to the health and education, the government is not contributing. Or let's say, for example, with respect to the COVID-19 challenges, there have been reports that doctors have voiced their concerns that they do not have the PPE kits as well. That is when there have been health ministers from couple of states who have actually given threats to that particular doctor for reporting such a issue that is prevalent in the health sector. So what is happening here? There is repression of the voice and there is neglect as well. These are some of the challenges when it comes to democracy. But democracy is the ultimate medicine when it comes to all the diseases that is prevalent in the governance. Why? Because democracy in principle grants individual a voice in governance. People also adopt democracy because they could be the participants when it comes to democracy. They can keep the government under check. How? By elections that happens every 5 years. In case they do not like it, they can actually push out that particular government, push out that particular political party, and there'll be a new political party establishing the government. So yes, there are institutional flaws. Yes, there are major flaws in the democracy. So all this will have to be worked, is what this article all about. Now let's look into the next article. This article here speaks about underrepresentation of women in parliament and politics and reforms that have to be introduced to change the existing imbalance. What is common in Germany, Taiwan and New Zealand? All these countries are headed currently by women when it comes to the national politics. It is also said they have managed this pandemic issue brilliantly. Then we have another example of United States of America. Women who are heading the states, who have the female governors, have also managed the COVID-19 crisis pretty well as well. So what this means is that we can come to a conclusion that women are effective in handling crisis better. But the problem is this is an issue, says the critics. Why? Because there are men who have also taken care of COVID-19 issues. They have also executed, they have taken up emergency plans and they have executed as well. So the critics say this has deficiency in the data, and we cannot also make sweeping generalization that women are far more effective when it comes to the COVID-19 handling. Yes, this is 100% right. Yes, there is no data. Yes, they cannot make generalization, but this is what we have been doing for couple of years when it comes to the patriarchy. How? We have always abused women in the mindset of patriarchy. We have not given them equal opportunities. We have also generalized that they are not effective when it comes to politics. We are not effective when it comes to other fields where men have actually dominated. So what we have to understand here is that we should not make any generalizations when it comes to gender, is the first major point. So what we require here is gender equality, gender parity, and not generalization whether men are great or women are great. Each are good in their own fields is the first important factor that we have to understand. Now when it comes to the national politics, there is a growing need for women legislators. So what are the advantages as to why women should be part of the legislatures? They perform significantly better when it comes to implementing policies that promote the interest of the women. After 1993 and 1994, what we had was the reservation for the women when it comes to the Panchayati Raj as well as the municipalities. So what exactly happens? Because we have reservation, and when an analysis and survey was conducted, they were able to identify what were the major issues that women undergo through, and that is when they were able to implement policies for the women. What exactly is the issue? Let me give you an example. Who are the ones who usually go get and fetch the water? It is the women. They have to walk long distances, so only women who's gone through this particular process will know the pain of it. So what the women pradhans did is, the minute they became the legislators in the municipalities or in the panchayati raj, they made sure that drinking water was given in a particular radius. Why? Because they have faced the heat of it, because they have gone through the pain, because they know what it is to go through a long distance and get this particular water. So because they have an idea, because they have seen through it, they can promote the interest of the women, is the first important factor. Then we also have the participation of female MPs in all these committees, who can actually bring in gender inclusive plans. Let's say for example we have a committee, or let's say for example there are legislatures who are in parliament or the state legislative assemblies. In case there are only men, they would not know what would be the perspective of the women when it comes to the passing of a bill. But when there is a woman, she can actually voice out the concerns of the women, and this will become a gender inclusive bill or an act for that matter. Now, when it comes to politics, if you ask me who is my role model, I might say Prime Minister Nehru is my role model, or I might say Prime Minister Vajpayee is my role model. So, what it means is that I have male members whom I can look up to and say these are my role models when it comes to politics. So, women also require role models, so they will also have to look up to someone. So, when it comes to politics, they can also look up to Indira Gandhi ji as well. So, the minute this happens, they will have a role model, they will be enthusiastic, they will want to encourage themselves to dive into the politics. That is when they become the active participants when it comes to politics as well. So what this will bring in is gender equality, gender parity. So it is not only men who are dominating, who are part of the politics, but women also require another woman who they can look up to, and that is what is the advantage when it comes to women in politics. When you look at statistics, women in India were allowed to vote from the year 1950 onwards. So when it comes to other Western countries, let's say for example in Europe or in United States of America, they gave the adult universal franchise for the women after couple of years. In United States of America, it took several decades of struggle before women were allowed to vote in 1920. Most countries in Europe also achieved universal suffrage during the interwar period. So what is this interwar period? There was a time where the world was going through a crisis. The First World War, this is when men were not able to stay back at homes, they had to enter the war zone as well. During these times where men were entering the war zone, it is the women who took up all the charges of politics and governance and administration. That is when people in Europe also discovered that women were able to also manage as well. But that did not happen with India, because initially after independence was given, that is when we initially went about giving equal representation for the women. We have had prime ministers, we have had chief ministers, and we have also had women becoming the presidents of India as well. But there are concerns as well. What are these concerns? Let's say, for example, after Indira Gandhi, we do not have any prime minister who is a woman. Then we also have chief ministers like Jayalalitha, who's no more with us. Then we have Mayawati, Sushma Swaraj, who's no more with us, and Mamata Banerjee ji. All these people have represented, they have become the leaders of their political parties as well as their states as well. But now it is only Mamata Banerjee in West Bengal who happens to be the only chief minister, which means that women are not able to climb the ladder of success when it comes to the representation at the highest level. Now, when you look at statistics, you have the female representation in the current NDA regime, which is very less, and when it comes to the ministerial strength in the NDA, it is almost up to 10%, which is comparatively less as well. Then there is underrepresentation of female ministers in India, and in the year 2019, election sent the largest number of women to the Lok Sabha. Despite this particular call, women just constitute about 14% when it comes to the Lok Sabha in the 2019 elections. So what are the various challenges when it comes to women representation in the parliament or in the state legislative? That is because women still face a number of challenges for their engagement in the political spaces, such as the financial independence. When it comes to man, he will have the financial autonomy. He would be able to spend as well. But when it comes to the women, because she has to rely on someone, the financial independence for spending in elections is comparatively less to a woman. Let us take another example. Let's say if it is a male who's contesting the elections, then you will be able to find donors who would be sponsoring for that male candidate. But if it is a female candidate, we would not be able to receive the funds, and donors would not contribute or sponsor to the women. That is where the financial independence is not present. Then we also have the entrance patriarchal views as well, which basically believes that women candidates are also considered to be way less capable than their male counterparts by the voters. In this particular backdrop, in order to overcome this particular issue, what we require is quota. Because ideally, when you look at it, women are not being given the tickets, and when you look at it, women are not being represented as well. So what we require is positive discrimination. This positive discrimination is in the form of quota. So this gender quota is basically in two types across the world. So what are these gender quota types? It includes: one is the fixed reserve seat, the other is voluntary political party quota. What is this fixed reserve seats? Let's say, for example, there are 100 constituencies. 100 constituencies are going into polling. Out of 100 constituencies, let's say 33 is only for the women, or 50% is only for the women, which means men in this particular seat cannot contest. So 33 seats out of 100 will be contested only from the women category. So the political parties which are giving the ticket for the constituency will only have women. That is what is called as fixed reserve seats. The next model is what is called as the voluntary political party quota. When it comes to the fixed reserve seats, we have the law, we have the constitution saying that these seats will only be contested by the women. The men cannot enter that particular constituency. But when it comes to the voluntary political party quota, the parties, the political parties like BJP or Congress, they decide that a certain percentage is given only for the women. So what is the difference here? When it comes to the fixed reserve seats, men would not be able to contest from that constituency. But when it comes to the political party quota, you might also have men who would be fighting women as well. So in that particular constituency, you will have both men and women who are contesting, but the political parties on a voluntary basis say that 50% will be reserved only for the women and other 50% for the men, but they would be able to fight against each other as well. That is what the quota system is, that is usually followed across the world as well. So what should India do? India going forward will have to come up with a gender quota on a fixed reserve seats or a voluntary political party quota where women representatives are reaching the doors of the parliament or the state legislature. In fact, a bill was also presented back in 1996 by H.D. Deve Gowda government as well, but that bill did not succeed or was not passed in the parliament of India. So what is that we have to understand here? As long as women are not treated equal to men, and when their intellectual capacity is not equated same to that of the man, that is when quota has to be provided. The minute people realize that men and women are equal, efficiency matters, intelligence matters, how they approach the problem matters, that is when quota system will have to be removed and only merit comes into picture. But as long as we don't have the merit system, as long as we don't have the gender parity, what we require is the quota system, says the author of this article. It is this that we have to understand with reference to this article. This article says 40% toilets in government schools non-existent, non-used, says the CAG. What is the context? We have one of the programs called as the Swachh Vidyalaya Abhiyan. This was initiated and launched by the Ministry of Human Resource Development. Why? Because under the Protocols of Right to Education Act, we have a mandate that all the schools must have separate toilets for the boys as well as for the girls. So what is the point here? The point is, under the right to education, there has to be construction of the toilets separately for the boys as well as girls. So what we require is construction of this toilets. So we have public sector units now who have claimed to have constructed about 1.4 lakh toilets in the government schools. But the CAG says there are concerns with respect to this particular construction. What are these concerns? The Comptroller and Auditor General of India have found it that these toilets have either been non-existent, or they are partially constructed, or even if they are constructed, they are unused when it comes to couple of schools as well. So there have been prefabricated structures that have been used for constructing these toilets, and they have also pushed in extra expenditure, dilution in durability, and all the directions issued by the ministry have not been followed when it comes to the construction as well. One is they have inflated the prices, and at the same time the rules that were supposed to be followed for the construction have not been followed as well. CAG has also said about 70% did not have running water facilities in the toilets, poor availability of water, and even in these toilets they did not have the hand washing facilities. That will be very important in case the classes starts off when it comes to the rural sector. What we also witness is that 75% were not being maintained hygienically as well. Lack of cleaning arrangements, poor maintenance, damages to the toilets, they did not follow the norms of daily cleaning as well, and in case they were cleaned, it was either in 2 weeks or once in every month. So where is the hygienity is the question. So cases of non-provision of soaps, cleaning agents, disinfectants for the cleaning was also not provided, and in few cases there was only one functional toilet. So what was the original idea? We had different toilets both for the boys and girls, but in few schools they had only one toilet where both the boys as well as girls were supposed to use it. So it violates the original intent of this particular idea of Right to Education Act as well. Further, these toilets have been used for other purposes as storeroom as well, and there have been other issues of lack of dedicated funds in certain areas, says the CAG. What has CAG done here? Out of 1.4 lakh that is said to have been constructed by the public sector units, CAG has actually surveyed about 40% of the toilets, and it has voiced all these concerns. So what is the recommendation given by the CAG? The CAG recommends that the concerned ministries will have to look into the issue of non-existing incomplete toilets and address all these issues that we have just discussed. It is this that we have to understand with reference to this article. Now let's look into some of the preliminary practice questions. Which of the following statements about Kaveri engine is or correct? Kaveri is an afterburning turbofan project developed by Gas Turbine Research Establishment, a lab under the DRDO. It is being successfully used in Tejas light combat aircraft since 2008. The answer to this is one only. Why? Because this is still not implemented in the Tejas light combat aircraft, and that is why this is a wrong option. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements. Macquarie Harbour is a large, shallow inlet located in the west coast region of Tasmania, Australia. Recently, it was in news due to massive oil spill in Australia. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is one only. Why? Because the second statement is wrong. It is not the massive oil spill. It is because of death of couple of whales in this particular area of Macquarie Harbour. So kindly remember this particular spot. It can be a potential question when it comes to your preliminary examination. What is the cause of it has been explained in our day before yesterday CNA. So kindly look into it. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements with respect to Comptroller and Auditor General. He holds office for a period of 5 years or up to the age of 65 years. He does not hold his office subject to the pleasure of the President. He is eligible for further office under the Government of India. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is 2 only. Why? Because it is not 5 years, instead it is 6 years, and the last option is again wrong because he is not eligible for further office under the Government of India. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. What is or common to the historical places known as Ajanta or Mahabalipuram? Both were built in the same period. This is wrong. wrong. Both belong to the same religious denomination. No. Ajanta belongs to the Buddhist and Mahabalipuram belongs to the Hindu identity. Both have rock cut monuments. Yes, this is right. So the answer to this is 3 only. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Democracy does not merely mean voting rights for people. It means empowering people by granting them equality and capability. Discuss. Indian democracy is in dire need of representation of women in legislative bodies. Explain the significance and how we can ensure the goal of equal opportunity. So please write all your answers on the comment section. Peer review, come up with constructive criticism as well. This is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.